I just happened to glance at the Chinese newspaper and I saw them carrying Canny, and I knew it was Canny already, but I didn't tell anyone. I could see her hair.
She came out crying and she said, it's her. It's her. And I was like, how do you know that? And she just said, it's the jeans she's wearing because that's my jeans.
Hello mysterious family, welcome and welcome back to Mysterious Mariam. I am Mariam Ahsan, and let me warn you for this one. This case contains some disturbing details of murder and rape, and if this is something you can't listen to right now, please feel free to skip out of this video and you can go through some other video on my channel which is more suitable for you. Let's get started. Canny Ong was born on July 18, 1974 to Ong Bee Jeng and Pearly Visvanathan in Ipoh, Perak, Malaysia. She was second and youngest daughter to her parents. She had two sisters named Elsie Ong and Ong Bee Jeng. Canny went to the US to study in university and studied economics in Hawaii. She met her husband Brandon Ong in Los Angeles when she went there to seek employment. She was a Malaysian working as an information technology analyst in San Diego, California, United States. Canny and Brandon got married in 2001. Together, the couple settled in San Diego. Canny was a considerate, kind, and dutiful daughter. In early 2003, Ong's father, Ong Bee Jeng, was suffering from cancer. Worried, Canny attempted to find out the type of cancer her father had. Her father had to undergo a surgery, and on June 1st, 2003, Canny flew from United States to Malaysia to visit her ailing father. Luckily, her father's condition improved and was recovering, so Canny was set to return to the US on June 14th, 2003. On June 13, 2003, a day before her flight, a farewell dinner was arranged for Canny by her best friend Noreen at Monty Restaurant at the Bangsar shopping complex with some family members and close friends. She parked her mother's car in the basement of the shopping complex. She had just finished a dinner of crabs and steak. It had been a night full of joy, and the younger members of the party were ready to kick on. At about 10:30, Canny noticed that her mother, Pearly, was looking tired. Always considerate, Canny offered to drive her mother home before returning to continue the party with her friends. She told Noreen that she was gonna come back after leaving her mother to the parking. Queuing to pay for the parking, she realized that she had left the ticket in the car. Canny dashed off to retrieve the ticket, leaving her mother and sister at the ticket machine. 20 minutes went by and Canny wasn't back. Her sister began calling her mobile. First call dialed by her best friend Noreen went unanswered, and then calls went to the message bank and her phone was turned off. Pearly and Elsie, sensing something wrong has happened, dashed to the parking lot. They couldn't see Canny or her car. They got extremely worried. They rushed to the shopping center's security office and begged the guards to show them the footage in the hope that they might find any answer to Canny's disappearance. Security guards told them that they could provide them with the footage only at the midnight. Just before the midnight, Pearly, Elsie, and a group of Canny's friends stood watching aghast as the grainy footage showed a Proton Tiara car on the move in the car park. It was Canny's car. They could see a stranger on the wheel and a woman cowering in the passenger seat as the vehicle sped towards the exit and smashed through the parking barrier. Now, the Bangsar shopping center had plenty of security guards. Canny's first piece of bad luck was that none of the security guards happened to be watching the CCTV screens at the moment when her kidnapper smashed her car through the exit barrier. If only they had seen the incident, they would have called the police immediately. Instead, the first call to the police was made more than an hour after the abduction. Her mother lodged a report of her disappearance at 11:59 at Jalan Travers police station in Kuala Lumpur. Now, the abductor was free on the road with Canny. At 11:15, the two undercover police officers had noticed a Proton Tiara stop by the roadside. Half an hour later, they drove past again and noticed the same car still in the same spot. This area was famous for drug dealing and criminal activities, so suspecting it was some kind of drug deal going on in the car, Subramaniam Ravichandran, one of the officers, decided to check. He approached the car, knocked on the driver's window, and introduced himself as a police officer and asked for their name and identity cards. The driver handed over both of their IDs. Examining the driver's card, the police asked the man to take off his cap. The man complied, but then refused officer's request for him to get out of the car. Hearing the officer's request, Canny had moved as if to open her door, but driver stopped her. "They are crooks, not cops," he snapped at her. Canny stopped. When Ravichandran once again asked the man to open his door, he noticed Canny pointing to herself and pressing her palms together in a prayer-like pleading gesture.
Dia menyembah macam itulah, minta tolong kan.
She did this while abductor's attention was on the policeman, but as soon as the man sensed her movement and looked back at her, she dropped her hand. At that moment, the driver hit the accelerator, leaving the IDs in Ravichandran's hands. Ravichandran fired on the tire in an effort to stop them. The car's tire busted out, but he sped away. Ravichandran attempted to chase the car, but he couldn't follow them too far. I mean, how unfortunate is this? Ravichandran had failed to get the message that Canny was so desperately trying to send him, and not just that, he even failed to report further authorities about the incident. Less than 15 minutes later, there was another potential opportunity for rescue. Amina Ishaq was on the way to the airport to collect her sister. Her brother-in-law was driving along with Jalan Sengai Way and had pulled over to the side of the road to wait for their other relatives to join them. As they waited, she saw a man get out of the Proton Tiara, parked about 20 feet in front of them. He came over to them and asked to borrow a jack to change his right front tire, but they didn't have that jack. That's when Amina's glance was drawn to the female passenger, who was looking frightened. She was pulling odd faces as if she was trying to signal about something to Amina in some way. Certain that something was dangerously amiss, Amina took a piece of paper to jot down the Proton's number. Moments later, the abductor gave up on the tire and drove off. Amina and her brother-in-law then went straight to Subang Jaya police station and reported the incident, and Amina gave car's number to the police. At around 1 a.m., Azizan Ismail was driving his company van. He saw the bluish Proton Tiara while looking for a piece of wood to support the broken seat of his van. He did not pay much attention to the car, but when he was walking to his van, he saw someone in the driver's seat about to drive away hastily. He saw a topless woman laying on the back seat. Thinking a couple is simply messing around, he drove away. He was back on the same road about 2 hours later. He saw the same car parked by the roadside in the direction of Kuala Lumpur, about 100 meters from where he first saw it. Azizan stopped his van behind the car. He saw no one in the car and it was not locked. However, there was a Nokia handphone on the front passenger seat. He said he took the handphone and knapsack bag and headed for his wife's house in Penang. On the way, he called his wife from the same handphone several times. While on his way, he stopped in Ipoh and sold the handphone for Malaysian ringgit 120, but kept the SIM card. He opened the stolen bag and found that it contained various kinds of pens, cigarettes, a lighter, a large brown paper, and a box of condoms. A day later, on his way from Penang, he stopped at a rest area where he sold the SIM card for 10 Malaysian ringgit to a motorcyclist. Canny Ong's Proton Tiara was found at 8 p.m. on Saturday night, June 14th, less than 24 hours after she was kidnapped. There were blood stains on the back seat, but absence of the body gave investigators hope that Canny was still alive. Her phone, therefore, was of urgent interest. That's when they tracked down Azizan, who stole the phone, and motorcyclist who bought the SIM. They were immediately taken into the custody and investigated. The forensic expert cut fabric from the front and back seat of the car to analyze the blood stains. On June 17, 2003, around noon, workers on Jalan Klang Lama flyover construction site noticed planks with burn marks on them laying across a manhole. They also were smelling a strange stench, so removing the plank and 2 cement-filled tires, they found the burnt body of a woman with brown shoulder-length hair. Her hands were bound in front of her and a piece of cloth was around her neck. The body was burnt charred, and let me warn you that photos of the found body are present on the internet on simple Google search, so be careful while you guys are doing further research on this case. Anyways, while police feared that remains were Canny's, they needed to wait for the results of DNA and dental tests to be sure. Meanwhile, Canny's sister and best friend were called to recognize the body. Canny's sister volunteered to go inside the mortuary to have a look at the body. After a few minutes, she came outside crying. She hugged Noreen and told her that it was Canny, as she is wearing the same jeans she borrowed her the night of June 13. The forensic pathologist who performed the autopsy on the found body were able to establish that this female victim had been strangled before her body was set ablaze, and she was stabbed 2 times with a sharp object. There was semen found in the victim's body, which very well had survived even after the body was set on fire. So this was a potential DNA evidence which could have given the killer's identity, but Malaysia back in 2003 had not yet established a national forensic DNA bank, though it has been established now. Therefore, there was no chance of any DNA profile from the crime scene being matched to a killer who was not already on detectives' radar. Victim's DNA profile was an exact match to Canny Ong. The news of Canny's abduction and discovery of a burnt body were already on the headlines nationwide. On the day the body was discovered, Canny's family had taken part in a press conference in which they appealed to the public for help. The police were hoping that someone might come forward with some information that could provide a hint as to the identity of Canny's abductor. The sudden burst of publicity linking a missing woman, a charred body and a proton tiara had made the undercover motorcycle cop Ravichandran recalled the woman and the suspicious driver in proton tiara he had questioned on the night of June 13th and whose identity card he had been left holding. Within hours, those cards were in the hand of the chief investigator Abu Bakr Mustafa. Now his team had a photo and a name: Ahmad Najib bin Aris, 27-year-old. Ahmad Najib bin Aris was born and raised in Muar, Malaysia. He was born sometimes in 1976. Ahmad Najib studied up to his third year and dropped out without continuing his final 2 years of secondary year school education. In 1998, he came from Muar to Kuala Lumpur for employment opportunities. He was later married and had 2 children aging between 2 and 1 and was employed as an airplane cabin cleaner in Malaysia Airlines since 2000. He was living in Pantai Jalam. So the address on the card handed over by Ravichandran was false. As the investigators looked into Najib's national record, they found many false addresses and many forged job records provided by the Najib in employment records. But Malaysian National Social Security Registry and Marriage Registry brought up an address for the man's wife. Surveillance of the wife by surveillance officers stacked out at the woman's workplace and followed her home. Police then set up surveillance of their house. Finally, shortly before 6 a.m. on the morning of June 20, 2003, a taxi pulled up outside the house. Ahmad Najib got out and police officers finally got him. His wife later told police that her husband regularly visited prostitutes and returned home in the early hours in the morning. According to the investigative officers, Najib showed no emotion during the questioning and even tried to turn back questions on the investigators to find out about the evidence police got against him. The next day, the man spent 3 hours in front of a magistrate, during which time he recorded a full confession. Ahmad Najib confessed to having gone on the shopping center car park late at night of June 13th. He told the magistrate that he had been looking for a woman he had a grudge against. According to him, mistaking Canny Ong for the woman, he had followed her to her proton tiara. When she opened the door, he had pushed her in and driven off. He claimed that he only realized his mistake when he checked his captive's ID card. He then maintained that he had intended to release her, but the encounter with motorcycle cop Ravichandran had spooked him. He also confessed driving to the road construction site, where he raped her and stabbed her 2 times. He admitted to placing his victim in the drain. In fact, he claimed to have held her and apologized before telling her that he was going to burn her body. He then hid the proton tiara 3 kilometers away and took a taxi to Pantai Jalam at about 6 a.m. The following day, he bought petrol, returned to the manhole and set Canny Ong's body on fire. The day after that, investigators took the man on a tour of the crime scene in search of more evidence, and they found a hair strand, an earring and blood stains near where Canny's body was found. During the preliminary hearing, Ahmad Najib was unrepresented. He had no lawyer to represent him in the court. He accepted that he had voluntarily made the confession and he was responsible for rape and murder of Canny Ong. Najib's neighbor recommended his case to Muhammad Hanif, a prominent lawyer of Kuala Lumpur, to represent and defend him in this case. And after Muhammad Hanif took over the case, despite confessing to the crime, Ahmad Najib pleaded not guilty, claiming that he was forced and tortured by the police to make the confession. So Muhammad Hanif challenged the validity of the confession in court. But the magistrate who was present when Ahmad Najib was first charged testified that Ahmad Najib seemed relaxed and had no physical injuries on him, which could have shown that he was forced to confess. The clothes he wore at the time of abduction had some traces of Canny's DNA. The fabric cloth which Ahmad Najib used to strangle her was the same type which airplane cleaners would use to wipe plane windows, and given his occupation, it further linked him to the crime. Let me tell you, I never despise the lawyers for what they do to defend the culprit because they are doing their job. But this man made me feel sick. The allegations and objections he put against Canny honestly made me feel disgusted. In the defense, Muhammad Hanif pointed out that why did Canny not take a chance to escape the car when Ahmad Najib was busy trying to replace the tire? And given that she had a black belt in martial arts, which actually led some people to suspect why. And they began speculating that whatever happened on the night of June 13th happened with the consent of Canny, as as claimed by Muhammad Hanif. And this theory left me fuming. The girl who left her own party in the middle, seeing her mother tired, and ran to parking alone because her mother's feet were hurting, went on a road trip with an abductor and consented to something like this, leaving her mother and ailing father worried and unanswered. Really? Please tell me your reaction on this in the comments below. Anyways, for this theory, some of the experts who were interviewed about the case rebutted the lawyer's claim, talking that it was easier said than done and no blame should be placed on the victim for her failure to escape. It was from their opinion not possible for Canny to be able to escape since she had no idea of where she was and it was 2 a.m. Another one of the experts, in response to the lawyer's theory, said the imagination and reality is different when it comes to such situation. The forensic pathologist testified that only area not charred on Canny's body by fire was skin under the ligature tied around her neck, which demonstrated how brutally tight the cloth was tied around her neck. On February 23, 2005, after a trial lasting 52 days, the Shah Alam High Court found Ahmed Najib guilty of the murder and rape. Consequently, for murdering Canny Ong, Ahmed Najib was sentenced to death. Additionally, for raping Canny Ong, the High Court judge Muhammad Idris sentenced Ahmed Najib to 20 years imprisonment and 10 strokes of cane. The randomness of the crime. Najib had no apparent motive. A woman who was having one of the best times of her life suffered this level of brutality in course of just few minutes. After the High Court sentenced him to death, Ahmed Najib filed an appeal against his conviction and sentence, but on March 5, 2007, the Court of Appeal of Malaysia dismissed his appeal, though they rejected the admissibility of the confession due to the possibility of police pressuring him to confess, as I mentioned earlier. Later on, Ahmed Najib appealed to Federal Court of Malaysia, the highest court, but the Federal Court also rejected his appeal. Ahmed Najib later appealed for the mercy from Sultan of Selangor to commute his death sentence to life imprisonment, but the plea of the pardon was rejected. On September 23, 2016, more than 13 years after the murder of Canny Ong, 40 years old Ahmed Najib bin Aris was executed by hanging in Kajang prison. Following Canny's abduction, shopping centers in Kalang Valley began introducing guarded women's only parking sections near the entrances. Many shopping centers installed CCTV cameras or improved their CCTVs to higher definition ones. In some buildings, panic buttons were installed to prevent such cases from recurring. Sad reality is all these changes now cannot bring this precious life back, but at least further mishaps can be avoided. That's all I have to say on this case. Do drop a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe if you liked the video, as your support helps me keep coming back with these videos, and I will see you next week.